I've been working as a night security guard for almost 8 years, and I've seen enough weird things to know when something isn't right. Drunks trying to sneak in, raccoons setting off alarms, even the occasional vandal. It all becomes background noise after a while. But there's one place I worked that I can't stop thinking about even now. The Northridge Logistics Center. It was an old shipping complex sitting half abandoned about 20 minutes outside the city. The kind of place that looks empty even in the middle of the day. Half the buildings were unused, some rented out for storage by small companies, and the rest just sat there rotting, full of dust, broken forklifts, and old crates no one wanted. I got assigned there for the overnight shift one Friday night, 10 p.m. to 6 in the morning. The other guard, a guy named Ray, called in sick that week, so it was just me. It's easy overtime, my supervisor told me over the phone. Quiet place. Just do your checks. Easy overtime, right? That first night, everything felt fine at first. The drive-in was uneventful, though I remember thinking how dark it was out there. No nearby houses, no lights past the chain-link fence except for the flickering yellow lamps on the loading bays. I parked near the main gate, clocked in on the handheld scanner, and started my rounds. The air was cold, the kind that carries every sound. My footsteps echoed off the walls as I made my way through the first few warehouses, checking locks and tagging each door with the scanner. Nothing out of the ordinary. Around midnight, I settled in the control room inside the main office. It was on the second floor with a big window overlooking the yard. The hum of the old fluorescent lights was the only thing keeping me company. In front of me were 16 black and white monitors, each showing a different part of the property. I sat there sipping bad coffee and watching the screens flicker. That's when I noticed Camera 9. Camera 9 was one of the older models, a grainy analog feed aimed down the north loading dock. It had this faint buzz of static that came and went, like the cable connection was bad. I leaned forward, tapping the monitor, thinking maybe it was just interference. But as I stared at it, I realized the static wasn't random. There was a shape inside it, a faint outline standing far down the corridor. I squinted, trying to make sense of it, but the figure didn't move. It just stood there, barely visible. I radioed dispatch. "Control, this is Unit 47. I've got possible movement in Zone 9. Can you confirm?" No answer. That wasn't unusual. The radios were spotty in that area. I switched to my flashlight, clipped my sidearm to my belt, and went to check it out. The air outside felt heavier, colder. My boots echoed on the concrete as I walked down the long hall toward the dock. The loading bay stretched for what felt like forever. Rows of closed steel doors, cracked windows, and flickering lights that buzzed like insects. I called out, "Security! If anyone's here, you need to identify yourself." Silence. I kept walking. When I got about halfway down the corridor, I heard something metallic, a faint tap. I froze, straining my ears. It came again, a slow, deliberate sound like someone lightly knocking from the other side of a metal door. "Hello?" I called, voice echoing. No answer. The tapping stopped. I waited another minute, then decided it was probably just wind rattling something loose. I went back to the control room, logged the incident as unconfirmed noise, and kept watching the monitors. The rest of the night was quiet. The next night it started again. Same shift, same silence, same creeping feeling that something was just off. Around 1 a.m., Camera 9 flickered again. This time the shape was back and moving. The figure was closer than before, standing almost halfway down the corridor now. I leaned in so close to the screen my breath fogged the glass. The static rippled, and for a second I saw what looked like a head tilt, like someone was looking directly into the lens. I grabbed the radio again. "Control Unit 47, possible intruder in Zone 9 requesting confirmation." Static hissed back. No response. I looked back at the monitor and the silhouette had shifted again. Closer. Much closer. My stomach dropped. I flipped to Camera 10, which faced the opposite end of the hallway, hoping to get a better view. Nothing there. I switched back to 9, and the figure was right beneath the camera now, head tilted up. And then, through the flicker of static, I saw eyes. 2 pale, shining dots staring straight at me through the feed. I jerked back, heart hammering. The monitor glitched violently, lines cutting across the screen, and then, just like that, the feed went dark. And at that exact moment, every light in the building went out. The hum of the fluorescents vanished. The air fell dead silent. The only light came from the dim red glow of the exit signs down the hall. I grabbed my flashlight and went to check the breaker. The switch hadn't tripped. Generator backup should have kicked in, but it didn't. I was about to head toward the generator room when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate footsteps echoing through the hallway outside. My pulse thudded in my ears. I called out, "Who's there?" "This is private property." The footsteps stopped. Then came a metallic clang like a door handle rattling. I swept my flashlight down the hall and saw the north dock door trembling slightly, as if someone was on the other side. I approached slowly, every step louder than it should have been. "Identify yourself," I called again. No response. The door handle twitched once, then turned halfway before stopping. I froze. Someone was trying to open it from the inside. I took a step back, hand hovering over my gun. The handle moved again, slow and deliberate, like whoever it was wanted me to hear it. Then, without warning, the door slammed from the inside. The impact was so loud it echoed through the entire corridor. I stumbled back, flashlight shaking in my hand. Then everything went quiet again. It took maybe 15 minutes before the power suddenly flicked back on. The hum of the lights returned and the cameras rebooted one by one. When camera 9 came back online, I half expected to see that figure again. But the corridor was empty, clean, no distortion. No static, but something else was wrong. There was a mark on the lens, a dark, greasy handprint smeared across the camera glass. I stared at it for a long time before picking up the phone to report it. Maintenance said they'd send someone out to clean it in the morning. I didn't tell them about the footsteps or the door, just logged it as camera interference. When my shift ended at 6, I drove home without turning on the radio. I just wanted silence. The next day, one of the maintenance techs, a guy named Kevin, called me. "Hey, you're the one who logged that camera 9 thing, right?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Did you find the problem?" He laughed nervously. "You could say that. The camera was half ripped out of the wall, man, like someone pulled it from behind." I frowned. "From behind? There's nothing behind it. That wall's solid steel." "Yeah," he said. "That's what I thought. But the bolts were stripped clean, and there were smudges on the inside of the lens cover. Like fingerprints." My stomach twisted. "You sure?" I asked. "Positive. Anyway, I replaced it. Should be fine now." He laughed again, but it sounded forced. That night, when I came back to work, everything seemed normal again. The new camera feed was crystal clear. No static, no distortion. The first few hours passed quietly, and I almost convinced myself it had all been a power glitch in my imagination. But at 3:04 a.m., the motion alert pinged again. Zone 9, I froze. Slowly, I looked at the monitor. There was someone walking down the corridor right toward the camera. The figure was tall and thin, wearing a uniform. At first, I thought it might be one of the day shift guys playing a prank, but then I saw the badge on his chest. It looked exactly like mine. He stopped right beneath the camera, tilted his head up, and looked straight into the lens. And that's when my stomach dropped. The man on the screen had my face, my same uniform, my same flashlight clipped to the same spot, even the same scar on my chin. He smiled, my smile, and then the feed cut out completely. Every light in the building went black again. The last thing I remember hearing was footsteps coming up the stairwell to the control room. Heavy, steady footsteps. They stopped right outside the door. Then there was a slow, deliberate knock. 3 times. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The doorknob rattled once but didn't open. Then silence. When I woke up, it was morning. I was still in the chair. The monitors were off. My coffee was cold. I checked the logs, no record of a power outage. The footage from 2:58 to 4:11 a.m. was gone. Completely missing. I tried to tell my supervisor what happened, but the look he gave me made it clear he didn't believe a word of it. They transferred me to another site that same week. I didn't argue. I never went back. It's been years since that night, but sometimes when I'm working other shifts, I catch myself staring at the security monitors a little too long. Every now and then, the feed will flicker, just for a second, and I'll see movement in the corner of the screen. Sometimes it's just dust or bad wiring, but once in a while I swear I see a shadow shaped exactly like me standing still, staring back through the camera, smiling. I used to work night security at a small industrial park on the edge of town, the kind of place filled with identical warehouses and barely functioning streetlights. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and after years in the job, I thought I'd seen it all. The site had 3 main buildings, A, B, and C, spread over a few acres, each one rented by different businesses. I was a packaging company. B stored auto parts, and C was mostly empty except for a single tenant on the upper floor, a record storage company that kept old documents, files, and microfilm. I was told no one ever used the basement of Building C. It had been sealed off years ago after a small electrical fire, or so they said. The property manager just shrugged and told me, "Don't worry about it." Doors welded shut, most nights were quiet. I'd start my patrol around 10 p.m., walking the perimeter, scanning checkpoints, making sure doors were locked. I'd sit in the security office between rounds, sipping stale coffee and half watching the grainy camera feeds. The cameras were old, ancient really, but they worked well enough. Except one. Camera 14 in Building C always had this faint hiss of static at the bottom of the screen. I tried wiping the lens, checking the wiring, even switching feeds, but it stayed the same. The weird part was that the static seemed to move, almost like it had a rhythm. At first, I thought it was interference from the basement wiring or maybe the old electrical panel, but after a while I started noticing shapes in it. One night, around 2 a.m., I was sitting in the office when I noticed a flicker on camera 14. It was supposed to show the empty hallway outside the basement access door, but there was movement. Just a shadow, faint and slow, like someone walking past the frame. I frowned, leaned closer, and rewound a few seconds. The figure was gone. I replayed it 3 times, but each time the static glitched right as the shadow appeared. It wasn't a bug or a bad pixel, it was a shape, human-sized. I wrote it off as a passing car outside casting light through a window. It made sense, sort of, but something about the angle didn't fit. The hallway had no windows. The next night I made a point to check Building C myself. I hated that place. Even during the day, the air inside was stale, like old paper and metal. The lights buzzed with a low, sickly yellow hum. I walked down the main hall, flashlight in hand, scanning the usual checkpoints. Everything was normal. Locked offices, empty restrooms, rows of filing cabinets through the glass doors. When I got to the far end, where the hallway turned into the restricted zone, I stopped. The basement access door stood there like a scar in the wall, heavy steel with a big rusted handle. Welded shut, the property manager had said. But when I shined my flashlight closer, I saw the faint line of a seam. Not welded, just locked. The air there was colder than the rest of the building. My breath came out in faint clouds, which made no sense. It wasn't winter, and there was no AC running at night. I tried the handle. It didn't budge, though I heard a dull metal clunk, like something shifting on the other side. I told myself it was just old pipes or air pressure. Still, I didn't linger. I walked back to the office, logged my round, and avoided looking at camera 14 for the rest of the shift. Over the next week, little things started happening. The motion sensor alarms in Building C would trip randomly, always near that same hallway. When I checked, there was never anyone there. I told my supervisor, and he told me to adjust the sensitivity or maybe replace the batteries. But the alarms weren't malfunctioning. They were reacting to something. I started noticing that whenever one went off, camera 14 would flicker. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of a shape, like someone standing just beyond the door. But every time I went to check, there was nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. Then one night, something new happened. Around 3:30 a.m., I was doing my second round through Building A when I heard a faint noise coming from Building C over the radio intercom. The system wasn't supposed to pick up sound. It was just for security alerts. But I heard what sounded like a low, dragging scrape, like metal on concrete. I stopped in my tracks, staring at the radio, trying to decide if it was interference. The sound came again, this time followed by a muffled thud. I sprinted back to the office, pulled up the feeds, and froze. Camera 14 showed the basement door wide open. I stared, jaw clenched. That door had never been opened before. The air on the monitor looked darker somehow, heavier. The hallway beyond the threshold was pitch black. No visible floor or wall, just an empty void swallowing the camera's light. I grabbed my flashlight, checked my sidearm, and went to Building C. Every step echoed louder than it should have. When I reached the hallway, the smell hit me first, damp, metallic like rust mixed with mold. The door was open, just like on the feed. A cold breeze wafted out, the kind that didn't belong in a sealed room. I shined my light into the darkness. The beam just stopped, like the air swallowed it. I should have called the cops. I should have called my boss, but I stepped closer instead because curiosity kills sense faster than fear does. The concrete floor leading into the basement was covered in dust except for a single line of fresh footprints. bare ones. They led downward into the dark. I took a few slow breaths, feeling my heartbeat in my ears. Then I did something stupid. I followed them. The basement stairs creaked under my weight, each step echoing into nothing. The air grew colder with every breath. My flashlight flickered twice and I cursed under my breath, tapping it to keep it on. At the bottom of the stairs was a long corridor with walls of exposed brick and pipes dripping with condensation. The smell of rot was stronger here. My boots left clean prints in the thick layer of dust, except where the bare footprints already were. They led straight down the hall to an old metal door that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Then I heard it. A whisper. Faint, distant, but definitely a voice. I froze. It came from behind the door. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like someone talking softly, like they were reciting something. I called out, "Security! Is someone down here?" The whisper stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any scream could have been. I waited a few seconds, then put my hand on the door handle. It was ice cold. The moment I touched it, my flashlight cut out completely. I yanked my hand back and something scraped the other side of the door, fast, heavy like fingernails dragging down metal. I ran. By the time I made it back upstairs, the door slammed shut behind me hard enough to shake the floor. I sprinted out of the building and didn't stop until I was outside in the cold air. When I got back to the office, camera 14 was black. No signal. I logged the incident as unauthorized access, possible vandalism, even though I knew that wasn't it. I went home that morning and didn't sleep. The next evening when I came in, the property manager was waiting for me. He looked uneasy. "You were in Building C last night, weren't you?" I nodded. He sighed and said, "That basement was supposed to stay sealed. We had issues there years ago. Contractors refused to work in it after the fire." I asked what kind of issues. He hesitated, then said, "One of the guys fell through the stairs during inspection. Never found his body. Place got shut down after that." I didn't believe him at first, but when I went back and checked the old maintenance logs, I found a report, dated 1998, about an unrecoverable accident in Building C. The basement had been sealed the next week. That night, I promised myself I wouldn't go near that building again. But promises don't mean much in security work when the cameras decide otherwise. Around 2 a.m., the motion alarm triggered, Zone 14. I turned toward the monitor and felt every hair on my arms rise. The camera feed had returned. The door was open again and something was standing in the hallway. It wasn't moving, just standing there half in shadow. I leaned closer, trying to focus. The shape shifted slightly. Then it took a step forward and the monitor glitched so hard that for a split second I thought I saw a face. Pale, mouth too wide, eyes completely black. The feed went dead again. I don't remember leaving the office, but the next thing I knew I was back in Building C with my flashlight trembling in my hand. I didn't even think. I just moved. The basement door was open, and a faint light flickered below like the glow of a candle. I could hear whispering again. Louder this time. Not one voice, many. Dozens murmuring over each other. I called out, but my voice sounded small, swallowed by the dark. I started backing away slowly when the whispering stopped all at once. Then from the darkness below I heard footsteps. Not coming toward me, running. The sound of bare feet slapping concrete fast, getting closer. I turned and bolted. I didn't stop until I was outside in the parking lot, gasping for air. When I turned back, the door was shut tight again. I quit the next morning. Didn't give notice, didn't explain. I just handed in my badge and left. A few weeks later, a friend who still worked there told me the property manager had sealed off Building C completely. New padlocks, boarded windows, everything. They said the company upstairs moved out too, claiming structural instability. But sometimes, when I drive by that part of town late at night, I can still see the faint orange glow of a light in one of the basement windows that shouldn't exist. And every time I think back to those footprints in the dust, I remember something that didn't register in the moment but chills me now. The prints weren't leading into the basement. I used to work the graveyard shift at Hollow Creek Mall, a job I never should have taken. Back then I was desperate, divorced, behind on rent, and willing to take any paycheck that didn't require talking to too many people. When the security company called and said they needed an overnight guard for a low-traffic property, it sounded perfect. I didn't ask why a mall that closed at 9 p.m. needed a guard until 6 in the morning. I found out soon enough. The first time I saw the mall at night, it didn't look real. During the day, it was all bright glass and food court laughter, but at 11 p.m. under flickering fluorescent lights, it felt dead. The air was stale, the escalators were still, and the fountain at the center made this awful gurgling sound that echoed off the empty tiles. The cleaning crew left by midnight, and from then until dawn it was just me and the cameras. The control room was a narrow booth tucked behind a staff-only corridor, with old CRT monitors showing every angle of the mall. My first few nights were uneventful. I'd walk my rounds every hour, check the gates, and radio the company if anything looked off. The hardest part was the silence. It was suffocating. You don't realize how much noise people make until it's gone. The mall seemed to breathe in the dark. I'd hear faint creaks from metal shutters, the hum of distant electricity, and sometimes what sounded like footsteps echoing a few stores away. I told myself it was the building settling. I kept telling myself that. The first weird thing happened about 2 weeks in. I was doing my 2 a.m. patrol when I noticed one of the lights near the old Sears entrance was flickering. That section had been closed for years, sealed off after the anchor store went bankrupt. The hallway beyond was chained and padlocked. But as I approached, the light stopped flickering, and I realized the gate was slightly open. Just a few inches. Enough to see the dark beyond. I froze. The lock was still on the chain, but it hung loose like it had been cut and then hooked back together. I called it in to the supervisor on duty. He sounded half asleep and told me to just secure it again. I didn't like the idea of stepping closer, but I wasn't about to lose the job. So I grabbed my flashlight and pushed the gate closed. The moment the metal clanged shut, I heard something from inside the dark store, like the sound of fabric dragging across the floor. Slow, heavy. I aimed my flashlight through the bars, but the light just hit a wall of black. I stood there for a few seconds, listening. Nothing. Finally, I locked the chain and left. But when I checked the monitors back in the office, camera 19, which faced the Sears gate, was filled with static. Over the next week, the static became a regular thing. Always around 2 or 3 a.m., that camera would glitch, and every time it did, I'd hear noises echoing through the mall. Sometimes it was footsteps, sometimes whispering. I'd patrol, shine my light, call out, nothing. But the sound always stopped right before I reached the area. One night, I tried recording the feed on my phone. When I played it back later, the static on the video seemed to pulse in rhythm with a faint whisper I couldn't quite make out. It sounded like breathing layered over a voice. Then came the mannequins. There was an old boutique near the food court that had gone out of business months earlier, but no one had cleared out its display. 6 mannequins stood in a row behind the glass, wearing dusty clothes from some long-forgotten summer collection. I passed them every night on patrol. They creeped me out, sure, but I got used to them, until one night one of them moved. I was walking past around 1:30 a.m. when I noticed the middle one was facing a different direction, turned slightly toward the hallway. I froze, heart pounding. I'd walked that route enough times to know exactly how they were positioned. That one had always faced forward. I even remembered the chipped paint on its shoulder. Now its head was angled like it was watching me. I backed away slowly, flashlight trembling, and returned to the control room. I rewound the camera feed for that section, camera 6, and watched the playback. For about 10 minutes, nothing. Then in one frame, the mannequin was straight. The next frame, it was turned. No transition. No human movement, just different. I stopped telling my supervisor about these things. He'd either laugh or ignore me, and honestly, I didn't want to sound crazy. But by then I'd started feeling something else, like the mall wasn't empty. Like it was aware of me. I'd walk past the dark storefronts and feel eyes behind every gate. Sometimes I'd hear faint footsteps behind me that stopped the instant I turned around. Once I heard a woman humming. The sound came from the second floor, near the shuttered food court, but when I went up there, every light flickered out at once. I ran back down, tripping on the last step, and swore I heard soft laughter echoing behind me. A few nights later, the maintenance guy, Ramon, came in around midnight to fix a broken pump in the fountain. I was relieved to have company. We made small talk, joked about the creepy vibe, and he laughed when I told him about the mannequins. "Bro, you're just tired," he said, tightening a wrench. But halfway through his repair, he went pale. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. I stopped moving. From somewhere above us, we both heard a faint clattering sound, like something being dragged across tile. Then silence. Ramon wiped sweat from his forehead. "Probably the pipes," he said, but his voice was shaking. He left early that night. That was the last time I saw him. He didn't show up the next shift. 2 days later, the cleaning crew told me he'd quit without notice. No explanation. I tried not to think about it, but every time I passed the fountain, I'd feel that same chill crawl up my spine. One night near the end of my shift, around 4 a.m., the alarms went off. Motion detected, Zone 3, the Sears hallway. I nearly jumped out of my chair. The camera feed was active, but instead of static, it showed something moving. Not clearly a shape, flickering in and out of the frame. I leaned closer, squinting. It was tall, humanoid, but distorted, like the signal couldn't fully capture it. The longer I stared, the more it looked wrong. Its limbs slightly too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. I blinked, and it was gone. I grabbed my flashlight and ran toward the Sears gate. When I got there, the chain was on the floor. The gate was wide open. Cold air rolled out from the dark, and I swear I heard faint breathing from inside. I aimed my flashlight in, but it didn't go far. The beam just seemed to die, absorbed by the black. I stepped forward, my boot crunching on something. I looked down. It was a security tag torn clean in half. The store was empty. Completely empty. But I could feel something watching from the dark. That's when the radio on my belt crackled to life with a burst of static. I froze, then through the distortion, a voice whispered my name. I dropped the radio. It hit the floor and went silent. I backed away, eyes locked on the void beyond the gate. Then something moved. Not fast, slow, deliberate. A figure stepped out just enough for the light to hit its face. Only it wasn't a face. It looked like a mask. A pale, featureless oval with 2 holes where eyes should be. I turned and ran. Back in the control room, every camera feed was flickering. One by one, each monitor went black, replaced by static. The sound filled the room, buzzing like an angry swarm. I could barely hear myself breathe. Then one screen came back. Camera 6, the boutique with the mannequins. All 6 were now pressed against the glass, faces tilted toward the camera. My stomach dropped. I reached for the power switch to shut everything down, and the lights in the room flickered out completely. The monitors glowed faintly in the dark. For a split second, one of them showed my own reflection in the control room standing in front of the screens. But there was something else behind me. A tall shadow stretching from the corner, moving closer. I spun around, flashlight shaking. Nothing there, but the air felt thicker, like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. I couldn't breathe. The buzzing from the monitors grew louder until it was deafening. I yanked the power cord and everything went black. I don't remember leaving. The next thing I knew, it was morning. I was sitting in my car outside the mall, the sun barely rising, my flashlight still in my lap. My head throbbed. When I went inside to return my badge, the day manager stared at me like I was insane. He said the overnight shift had been canceled after a power surge took out the security system. He claimed the mall had been empty all night. I didn't argue. I just handed him the badge and left. For weeks afterward, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see that mask, featureless, smooth, and silent. I kept dreaming of the mannequins moving in the dark, whispering in voices that sounded like mine. A month later, out of morbid curiosity, I drove by the mall. It was closed indefinitely, some kind of structural inspection according to the notice on the doors, but through the front glass I could still see the fountain faintly glowing blue in the dark, still running, and for just a moment, I could have sworn one of the mannequins in the boutique turned its head toward me. I drove home and threw out my uniform that night. I don't work security anymore. I can't. But sometimes when I'm out late and walk past a store window, I catch my reflection, and for a split second, it looks like that mask, smooth, blank, watching me from the other side of the glass.